This is page 2 in your notebook for AP European History. Page 1 was chapter 11, the chapter on the end of the Middle Ages. This is chapter 12 lecture, European Society in the Age of the Renaissance, 1350 to 1550. Okay, and this is the official beginning of AP European History. And anyway, we're getting started here through this year's course of European History. And this is the Renaissance. Okay, so the word Renaissance, or as some people say, Renaissance, means rebirth. And it was coined by this person, Vasari. And the thing is, this person came up with this term hundreds of years after this was over. Okay? And so that's what historians do. Most of us, I guess all of us, we just live our lives. And then, at the end of our lives, we think back over when we had happy periods and sad periods. Frequently, I can tell you, as someone who's nearing 60, when I think probably, I've told my wife this, that when we're at the end of our years and we're looking back over our life, I will always think that the happiest time of my life was when our kids were small. But at the time, we just built a new house. We had big house payments, at least for us, 2 school teachers. She wasn't even a school teacher yet. She was a legal secretary. She was going back to college to become a teacher. I was teaching. We were broke all the time. We built our house out here, and there was like nobody around us, this old abandoned road and dirt roads. Now there's neighborhoods all around us. The place is really built up, and we were broke a lot and had trouble paying the bills. I mean, we weren't behind. We were just poor. But in the long run, those things didn't really matter. We had our kids, and I think we'll look back and think that was our happiest time. Although at the time, we sure didn't think that. We couldn't, wait for, things to advance along where we had a little bit more money. They would pave the roads around us and things like that. But that's what happens. There were plenty of happy people in the 1930s in the United States. What do historians call that? The Great Depression. What were the 20s? The Roaring 20s. There were plenty of miserable people in the 20s that were much happier when the 30s came along. But historians have labeled these time periods, and they have characteristics, and they write books about that. So many years later, this person called this time period that we're going to be talking about the Renaissance, which, when it was happening, people would have had no idea they were part of something new. What I'd like for you to do here, it's 8 o'clock at night and I'm drinking coffee. This is actually the second time I've recorded this lecture. For those of you who've had me before, you know what's happening. I draw all these ugly maps in class. Not too many in Europe, plenty in the world. But I want you to draw this in your paper. And it can be just as ugly as this, okay? And this is a mountaintop, a bigger mountaintop, a huge valley, and then a mountaintop here. And I teach this in AP World History, and I always like to ask the kids, what is this? And you always have some really sharp kid who will figure out that this is the Greek. These are the Greeks. This is Greek civilization. Because at the time in European history, the Greeks, they started democracy, not like our democracy, but the beginnings of something like democracy. Greece is known as the birthplace of democracy. But the Greek Empire or civilization was considered to be the greatest moment in European history. Okay? And then it fell apart or was taken over, whatever happened. We don't teach this anymore in world history. World history is like European. The European history class you're taking is modern European history. A couple of you commented yesterday when we did that lecture, and you saw that the book you're using starts with chapter 11. That's because the first 10 chapters go in the book on ancient European history. That's when you find all this stuff. So this is the Greek civilization, then it collapses or was taken over, and then you have an even greater civilization, which of course was the Roman Empire. And so I want you on your notes there to write Greeks here and write Romans here. And the Romans may be, I don't know what historians would say, it may be the greatest empire in Roman history, in world history. It's often compared to the Han Chinese. There were some other great empires. There was the Maurya and Gupta down in India. The Muslims had the Umayyads and Abbasids, and later on the Ottoman. But the Roman Empire is a pretty big deal in world history. Lots of terms we use. If you grew up in church and you know your pastor's always preaching out of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, you know lots of Roman terms just because you've heard them. Because at the time that Jesus was alive, now of course I told my AP World kids, you know, some people don't believe Buddha actually existed. Some people don't believe Jesus existed either. Whether or not he existed, you know, that's not for me to solve here. And whatever you want to believe, feel free to knock yourself out. But the deal is if you read those stories from the Gospels, you hear lots of Roman terms. Like there's several stories where it talks about Jesus dealing with a centurion. A centurion was a Roman soldier in charge of 100 men. What were the Roman armies called? Legions. I mean, they're famous for having the legion. And the legion was a tough, disciplined fighting force. And there's tons of stories in history about just how tough the legions were. What else have we got? They paid the Roman soldiers frequently in salt because salt was valuable. That was called their salarium. We get the word salary from that. So when your parents go to work and get a salary, that actually comes from Roman culture. So that is the Roman Empire. And the Roman Empire collapses. And the thing is, I'm a big fan. This is going to seem weird for me to tell you this, you know. Second week of class, I'm a big fan of zombie stuff. I've read books on it. I love, my whole family watches The Walking Dead. When the kids were younger, I mean, Walking Dead, I don't know what year they're in, but it's been running. There's two of them now, Walking Dead and Fear the Walking Dead. For those of you who don't know, it's a TV show on zombies, the zombie apocalypse. And so when I teach AP World and I have to explain to them what feudalism is, because that's what this is, I want you to go ahead and write feudalism down here. When you have the Roman Empire, if there was a problem, you could call for Caesar to send in the legions, and they would come in and take care of the problem, which usually meant wiping everybody out. The Romans fought with this concept of a shield wall, where you just get shoulder to shoulder with your buddy, and as long as you stay where you're supposed to be, a Roman legion lined up with your shields in front of them could stand up to cavalry. Okay, but anyway, I'm going to digress. I read lots of historical fiction. But the deal is you had structure, you had organization. And the thing is, this is going to be a big issue. I don't want to get off topic in this presidential election right now. If you don't know that there have been some issues in the streets, maybe you have not been watching the news, but there's a big issue about order. And a lot of people, I used to teach middle school, the kids didn't want any order. They wanted disruption, all that. I can, you know, because they're just kids. I probably was the same way. But most people think that society thrives on order. And so with the Roman Empire gone, there was no order. There was no structure, and it was lawless, and there were brigands everywhere. That was the theory. So now, in the TV show Walking Dead, it starts in Atlanta. Atlanta, major city, civilization collapses. There's zombies going everywhere. Where would you want to be? In the city or way out in the country? And I hope you said in the country. So in the first couple of seasons, they get out, actually in the first season, they get out of the city and they go out into the countryside and they try to find a place that's safe. A place that's safe that they can fortify and they can protect themselves because they're greatly outnumbered not only by zombies, but frequently by other groups of people who want to take their food. And there's a couple of seasons where they're on a farm, and then there's a couple of seasons where they're in a prison, which makes a pretty good fortress because it's already got walls and all that. And if you think I'm wasting too much time, I'm really not. I want you to understand this. So what you have is a collapse of civilization. So you get out of the cities and you go out in the countryside. And so what they did back then, I'll get off the zombie thing here, but the parallels are very, very good. You know, you want to get out of the city and it doesn't, you know, if you're a history teacher, you're not all that valuable. But if you can fight, you're the most important. If you watch Walking Dead, you know, everyone's favorite people are the two fighters, Daryl and Michonne. Anyway, so the deal is they go out into the countryside and you gather yourself around a strong man and you gather yourself great fighters. These fighters became called knights. Okay, now remember in Japan, the same thing's going on, Japanese feudalism. Their knights are called samurai. So this is quite common. Right down to authority. You get out in small bands and you get out in the middle of the countryside. And what happened during the Dark Ages is what this is called, is they get out there and basically as time went by, you had these leaders, king, prince, duke, doesn't matter what term you use. It was a strong man. And what the strong man does, he has like deputies, and under the deputies are fighters, and this is feudalism. It's a hierarchical military control system set up. And so the deal is, where I go on with this, the strong man lives in the nice house, his knights live around it, and then the serfs live out there, the people that are raising cows and the chickens and all that stuff out there. And what happens is they start to build walls around the central part of this. If you've ever studied Greek history, they fortified the tops of hills. I think the word is Acropolis. I might have the wrong word there. But anyway, the deal is these guys live out in these areas, and as the centuries go by, that strong building, they put a stockade fence around it, and then they dig a ditch, because it's hard to fight going across the ditch. Then eventually they filled the ditch with water, and the stockade became stone walls, and eventually you have yourself a castle, the very symbol of feudalism. So on your paper here, I want you to write here, I want you to write Dark Ages, Middle Ages, and write medieval time. Medieval means middle. Middle, of course, means middle. And what middle means is it's between something. It is between something. What is it between? So it's between the Greek and Roman Empire and something else. You could call this an interim period. So I'm sure you know the answer. If we were in class, I'd ask somebody. Generally, so many kids know what this is. You'll have 5 or 6 blurt out the answer. What is the next peak, the next high point in European history? What's the name of this chapter? The Renaissance. Okay? So make sure you have that. And you write this in your notes. There will be frequently times that'll make you draw stuff like this. Make it kind of visual. If you think this is bad, wait till I start drawing maps. Those of you who had me for AP World, I don't do many maps like that in European. That's mainly an AP World History thing. Okay, so where was I? So the Renaissance is this new rebirth. But here's what I want you to write. It's retro. Is that the right word? Instead of looking forward, they're looking backwards. Make sure you're writing all this stuff down. They frequently give essays. I'm dang sure going to give you one on the Renaissance. And this is all contextualization. So years ago, my son, who's this video game guy, is I think if you saw in my biography video, he had a bunch of his friends over here and they were playing this game. And I had noticed that year in class, like I'd bring up classic rock songs expecting the millennials, because these guys, they're not Generation Z, they're millennials. I was expecting them not to know, but I'd bring up a Rolling Stones song or Led Zeppelin. There was a time when most kids didn't know what that was. But I'd bring it up, these kids all knew about it. And I said, how do you guys know about all these old songs? Why are you listening to AC/DC? Why are you listening to ZZ Top? And the kid said it's because of these games. Guitar Hero and Rock Band. So what was that, 14 years ago? That was a while back. And so one day, my son had a bunch of his video game geek buddies over here at the house, and they're playing Guitar Hero, Rock Band, one of them. And I'm in my office doing some work, trying to ignore all the noise in the living room because there's a bunch of kids over here. It's kind of weird when students, a lot of them are students of mine, they're over at your house. So my house is crowded with AP kids, and they're playing video games on the big TV. And I come out, and they're listening to this song. They're acting like they're playing it, called Barracuda by Heart. Now, I saw Heart in concert back in the Superdome in New Orleans. And I thought it was pretty cool that they knew the song Barracuda. So I went back in my office and got an acoustic guitar and walked out and played the song for them on a guitar. And I thought they would be impressed. And they're like, oh, wow, Coach Russell knows how to play this song. And I said, would you guys like me to show you how to play it? Thinking they would be all, and they're like, no, we'd rather play the video game. And I told my son later on, I said, what kind of video game geeks want to play the game rather than real thing? He goes, all of us, Dad. So anyway, what was interesting is when that game came out, it made kids interested in the past, but most of us are not interested in the past. Most of us, we're interested in our memories, but we're looking forward to the future. Okay? Most of you can't wait till the new iPhone comes out. All 4 of us in our family have Google phones. I forget what they're called. But we have Google phones, and our cell phone service is the Google Fi plan. And so we have Google phones running Android software, and we can't wait until the new version of the phone comes out because we want to upgrade. Well, you can't wait. Most of you can't wait till your favorite band or singer or whatever has a new release. And so most of us look forward. These people look backward. So make sure you have that down. Now, I did spend a lot of time there, but it was not wasted time. You have to understand this. And when you get an essay on the Renaissance, and you are going to, I just did all your contextualization for you. All right, moving on here. The Dark Ages were over. By the way, some kids actually think the Dark Ages mean there was no light. Somebody turned the lights out. They now look back at the Dark Ages, and they realize, there was a lot of good stuff going on. And so there's new interest in the Greek and Roman classics, underlying the word classics. So whenever we talk about classical, they're studying the classics, they're studying the Greeks and the Romans. And historians used to believe that the Renaissance was a big break with the past. Wow, things are really different. Now they have a more nuanced view. They say it's more of a bridge. And civilization really didn't die during the Middle Ages. I know lots of people who are fascinated. They're more interested in the Middle Ages, in the knights and the castles and the 100 Years' War than they are the Renaissance. They're like, what, a bunch of stuffy people looking at statues. These other people were more interested. So there's, a difference of opinion on this. I think probably most historians now believe it's a bridge. All right, so as I told you in the last lecture, this is Florence. This is the birthplace of the Renaissance. And it's spelled Florence. Now, just so you know, we've started a regular AP European history, and I gave you your first study guide yesterday. Let me explain to you how this works. Okay? So this class is a 70-30 class. Okay? 70%, 30%. There's only really 2 grades that go on the 30%. Your study guides, and you're going to get 3 a chapter. Okay? Your study guides and your notebook grade, they all go in the 30%. Everything else goes in the 70%. Now, retake work. I don't do test corrections. I do retakes. So let's say you bomb the Chapter 12 test. Okay? This year, I'm going to limit retakes to 70%. So if you want to get an A, you got to nail the test the first time. Every now and then, this doesn't happen much in Euro, but it happens in macro all the time. If I teach a hard concept, or I feel like I really did a poor job teaching something, which happens to macro all the time, I will sometimes say, okay, I'm going to let you retake this test to 80, 90, or 100%. But that's probably not going to happen too often in Euro. So here's the deal. If you do the 3 study guides and turn them in, every chapter we're going to have 3 study guides. If you do the 3 study guides, that's your retake work. So let's say you take this test and you bomb it. Now, those of you who've had me before, you know generally, kid will say, I want to retake a test. What do I have to do? And I'll say, you have to do all these notes. A little bit different in this situation. You're doing your retake work before you take the test. Okay? So if you do all 3 study guides for Chapter 12 and you bomb the test, you can email me and say, I want to do the retake. I'm going to check to make sure you did the 3 study guides. If you did, and you got 100s on them, then you're going to get to retake the test up to 70% unless I give you a higher percentage. That's how it works. So if you don't do 1 study guide, if you do 2 and don't do the other, and you bomb the test, you don't get to do a retake. Okay, I'm letting you know this up at the beginning. The study guides are important. Frequently we do, last year we started doing every day the study guides were due. We would do an FRQ that day. An SAQ. And we may do that. Those of you who had me for AP World, we did the same thing. We may do that this year once things get up and running pretty good. But right now, they're not running very good. So just so you know, that's how it's going to work when we're up and running. The 3 study guides is going to start now. Okay, let's move on. This is what Florence looks like today. I'm so jealous. Some of my students go on vacation, on holiday is what I was going to say. And they send me back pictures of Florence, and I just think it's beautiful. And I like to make fun of Coach Hoover's in art history, but I wish I had taken art history, and I wish I'd had him as my teacher. I think he's an outstanding teacher. Don't tell him I said this. As far as, don't tell him I said this. But the deal is, I'm fascinated with this stuff, and I wish I'd learned all of it. I did take classes in it and I passed them, but I don't remember darn thing. But I'm jealous frequently of my students because they'll go over and take pictures in all these places. But this is Florence. All right, wealth and power in Renaissance Italy. Okay, now, what we said was the Roman Empire collapsed. Okay, now, some of you are seniors and you're taking economics at the same time, but we haven't gotten, some of you are seniors and you're sitting in my AP macro class. Well, you're sitting at home watching it on YouTube. But the deal is, you're going to learn about these things called recessions, and we're in one right now. And think of it like this: economy's up and down, like waves in the ocean. That is called the business cycle. Okay? And so what happens is, I don't know how to explain this without getting overly political. And by the way, I am pretty conservative. I do not hide that. I had a professor at Valencia who told us his political party the first day of class. And I'll just tell you, it was the exact opposite of mine. And I remember he got up and said, I'm very far on this side, and I'm very far on the other side. And when I heard this guy do the introduction, I just remember thinking to myself, I'm going to hate this guy and hate this class. Turns out it was one of the best classes I ever took. And what I like about him coming out and identifying what he was is when he got really opinionated and went on a rant, which he would. And I would actually argue with him, and I loved it. Because what he did something I used to do. I quit doing it. I don't know why. Whenever there was a test, whenever he would pass up the test grades, he'd give the top 3 grades in class. And it was frequently me. And he'd always say, well, unfortunately, the highest grade goes to this. And he would say Republican or Democrat, whichever I am. I'm sure you all know by now. He would say that in my name. Instead of being offended, I just was so proud. And I got to give him credit because I got to where I could look past his point of view. And so in years past, I've told kids my political party the first day of school. This year, there's so much cancel culture and people having their careers ruined over nothing. There's some guy up in, I think it's Minneapolis, whose daughter, when she was 16, posted something on social media that was inappropriate, absolutely inappropriate. And this guy owns, I think, like 5 restaurants and has something like 300 or 400 employees. Everything's shut down now because he's being canceled because of something his teenage daughter said, which she admits is wrong and he admits was wrong. So anyway, it's just kind of a rough culture out there now. And both sides are doing it. It's both sides are doing it. I'm not trying to be political here, but I'm just saying, there's some stress on the system out there. This is a nasty election, and I don't care which side you're on, you have to agree, this is a nasty election we're going through here. So I'm going to kind of back off a little bit, but I'm just going to tell you, I learned from this person. And I disagreed with everything he said. I mean, if he said it was sunny outside, I would say it's dark. But I knew where he was coming from, and I just factored that in. And you can certainly learn from people you disagree with. And you should learn something new every day. Anyway, I'm getting off topic here. But I will say this. For those of you who had me for AP World, there's probably about a third or half of you had me for AP World. This is my flagship class. If you think I'm going deeper with you guys, I am. In my opinion, this is a cut above. They've asked college admissions counselors numerous times, the College Board has. They said, when you have people come to college and apply, what would you rather see on their transcript? World history, European history, or American history? Overwhelmingly, European history. It's probably, I don't know that it's a tougher class, but I consider this my flagship class. I consider that I have the smartest kids on campus. My pass rate was so high last year, it's actually embarrassing. And because, like, my macro pass rate wasn't what I wanted it to be, my world was very good too. I do not want to bring it up because it was not a fair year. Plus, they gave me a DBQ, which I think was fairly easy and straightforward for my students. But if you think I'm going deeper and giving you more, I consider this an intellectual class. This is an elective. You're in here either because you love history or you want to be valedictorian. And so you need more. So like I said, if you've had me for AP World, I'm definitely going deeper with this class, and I will continue to do that. All right, so this thing going where the economy's going up and down, that's called the business cycle. Okay, so this is where I got off on politics. So there is trouble in the streets of some of our cities today. That is not good for business. Because if you're a business in that, let's say you have a pizza shop in a part of town where all this trouble's going on, who's going to want to go there to get a pizza? Are your drivers going to want to go to work? So we need, and I'm not trying to say these protests or whatever's going on should happen or not. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying businesses want a fair amount of stability so they can make money. So, if that concept is true, what economic shape is Europe going to be in when the Roman army is gone? It's going to be bad. When people are living out in the middle of nowhere trying to get as far away from people. So make sure you understand that. There's been a prolonged depression in Europe for hundreds of years called the Dark Ages. So look right here, what's going on. What's going on is people are starting to move back to the cities. Something like countries are starting to pop up. They're really more like city-states, and they're having their own armies, so it's gradually getting safer. And so there is, make sure you underline this, there is economic revival, which means people have extra money. In economics, we would call this disposable income. When you just have enough money to pay your bills, that's called just having enough money to pay your bills. That's called subsistence living. Once you have extra money to either put in a savings account or to paint your house or, to have a nose job, to have a hair transplant, that's disposable income. And some, I don't know who does hair transplants, plastic surgeons maybe, I don't know what you call them. I'm not getting one. So the deal is, you've got extra money, you can start doing things like putting statues in your courtyard. And so the key to the Renaissance is economic revival. Okay? And the term patronage, these were rich people that basically used their money to sponsor artists. So this is all key in the beginning of the Renaissance. And the most famous family in Florence and the richest were we always called them the Medici. Some people call them the Medici. I've heard them called the Medici. Which one's right? I don't know. I'm not Italian. I'm redneck, whatever country we're from. So the deal is the Medici, whoever, they hired a young guy to come live in their house. Who can do that? Could your parents afford that? Don't answer. That's a rhetorical question. I don't want to know. Last summer, I delivered, the kids got European shirts, a lot of them, and the color was purple, which as you see is the background of this lecture. And the water polo hoodies all came in like, I guess it was early July. And so I delivered them personally to these kids' houses. Wow. Some kids live in some pretty nice places, much nicer than mine. My house might be the little place they have it in the back for their servants. Anyway, the deal is you got these rich people, and they hire a young man to come into their house. And I believe Hoovers would know what he was doing. I believe he was painting these things called frescoes. And he was a young guy who history knows as Michelangelo. Can you imagine Michelangelo living in your house? And so, because they're paying his bills and they're feeding him, he doesn't have to worry about going out and slaughtering, a buffalo or whatever they have over there in Italy to eat every day. He's being fed. All his basic needs are being taken care of. He can focus full time on his art. And so once again, you're going to have these artists and stuff that have time to sculpt and paint and all that. And what are they painting? They're painting items from Greek and Roman history. All right, you can just write this down. Italy did not exist then. The peninsula did. What it was a peninsula with a bunch of city-states on it. There's a famous guy who you probably never heard of in any other class. There's some people that are going to show up in this class. I think this guy's name is in the AP World History book probably once. He's got an entire time period in AP European. His name is Metternich. And he is the foreign minister or the diplomatic guy for the Empire of Austria. And Somebody called Italy a country once in front of him, and he said, Italy's not a country, it's a geographic expression. Wow, what an insult. Because what you have in Italy is you have city-states, and Venice is one of them. So the Renaissance begins in Florence. And here's some vocabulary. Hopefully, I don't need to go over this. It should be in your study guides. By the way, I hope you're paying attention to this lecture. I know I've been wandering all over the place. But believe me, in my mind, this is not wandering. I do get off topic. As far as I'm concerned, everything I've said today, even my talk about zombies, is something you need to know for this class. I will tell you, every now and then we have a difficult chapter in this class, especially the one between World War I and World War II. We have to learn about all the philosophers and all the, Sigmund Freud and all those guys, all the stuff going on. There's a whole bunch of names to remember. Every now and then, I will tell the kids, hey, I'm going to let you use a study guide on this chapter. I would do that last year. I'd say, okay, we're covering this chapter. I've already taken up all 3 of your study guides in class. This, of course, refers to when we're all in class. And I would say, okay, you can choose one of the study guides to use on the test. So here's what I'm telling you. As you are doing your study guide, any extra facts you want to write on them is fine. I don't usually let kids use study guides on the test. But every now I have been known to do that. So anyway, merchant guilds. A guild is something like a union. I hope you know what a union is. We have a teachers union, and I belong to it. And someday this week, I think it's Wednesday, they want us all to wear red. And I will not do it. That, in my mind, is the color of communism. And if you don't know what that is, you will learn. Generally, teachers wear red on May the 1st. And there's probably 10 or 15 on a pop, it's free. It's up to you if you want to. But on May 1st, you'll notice a lot of your teachers are wearing red. Me and several others won't ever do it because of the associations with communism. And obviously the red stands for blood. Moving on here, some vocabulary. You want to write all this down. It goes with the Italian Renaissance. The cities are fighting all the time, and they have all these treaties and stuff. It's not important to know all that. Just know that, you can go ahead and write this down. Italy, this concept grew in Italy because there's so many city-states fighting each other in alliances that this concept of the balance of power. Anyway, some vocabulary here. Signore is one man ruled. He passed it down to his son. We would call it a king in any other culture, but they were called the signore here in Italy. And you had these rich families that ruled cities. These are oligarchies. In the business world, when you have industries that are dominated by a large firm, that's called oligopolies. Aristocratic courts, we're going to come into this later on. All right, there we go. The Medici family, and you want to know their business is the banking industry, so make sure you know that. There were 2 famous banking families in Europe. There was the Medici. I'm sure there were many others, but there are 2 super famous ones that hundreds of years later we learned about. The Medici, who were not only bankers, but they ruled Florence. And up in northern Europe, I got to be careful how I say this. I'm going to spell it for you. Fugger, banking family. They were in northern Europe, and they at one point even bailed out the Catholic Church. That's how much money they had. There's many famous popes we're going to be talking about. During the Renaissance, this was one of the popes that happened. Most of your popes were Italian. This guy was Spanish. And you should know that priests are supposed to be celibate. That means they're not supposed to have sex. They're sure enough not supposed to be married. And they sure as heck aren't supposed to have children. Alexander VI had all that. I don't guess he had a wife, but he was quite sexually active. And he made his son, I would call him Caesar Borgia, but he put him in charge of the army or something. And if you ever hear his name in Italian, it's pretty cool. To me it's Caesar, but it's Cesare. And he had his daughter Lucretia. Now, I don't like saying this on a video, but if you study European history, and clearly I have, Alexander VI is famous. There was this time period of the so-called, and I want you to put this in quotes, secular popes. meaning these guys were in charge of the Catholic Church, but there was basically nothing. I don't know what the word Christian means to you, but for most of us, we would not have considered these guys Christian. They're raping and murdering, doing all sorts of stuff. And if you're Catholic and you think I'm trashing the Catholic Church, I am not. If you go to your priest, I've known at least one Catholic priest quite well. He was extremely educated. If you go ask them, they'll tell you this was true. There was this time period of the secular popes, and the most famous of them probably is Alexander VI. He had several kids, and Lucretia, again, I hate to say this on camera, but she is famous in the story, the legends that come out of the Renaissance in Southern Europe, is that he had an affair with his own daughter Lucretia, and her name is kind of representative of some wild woman who would have sex with her father. I don't know that there's any proof that you could find through the centuries to prove that they actually had an affair. It may be that people who hated him, and there were many, spread this, just to tarnish his reputation. But anyway, the stories are out there. There are 2 TV shows, one called The Borgia, and I think the other was called The Borgias. And I saw one of them. I do not recommend it for you until you're at least 100 years old. There's the one I watched. There's one that's got a whole lot of Hollywood stars in it, and there's the other one that apparently was filmed in Europe. And I watched that one. It was very, very accurate, but there's tons of sex, and you shouldn't do it. You'll get grounded for the rest of your high school career. But anyway, just so you know, in historical circles, there's been 2 TV shows, series made on these people. And I want you to write this down here. You should have learned this in AP World History. There was a point in time where Catholic Spain and Catholic Portugal were about to go to war over all their new territories. So they called up the Pope. Now, of course, they didn't have cell phones back then. They got the Pope involved because him being head of the Catholic Church, he was the one person the Spanish king and the Portuguese king would listen to. And he's famous for taking a map and drawing a line down the middle and saying, hey, Spain, you get everything on this side, and Portugal, you get everything on this side, which hasn't already been taken over, and that way it'll keep you from fighting. And here's what Spain got. Oh boy, this is important. Let me tell you the name of this treaty. So go ahead and write it down. Treaty of Tordesillas. Treaty of Tordesillas. I want to say it was 1494. I don't know. I'm going to click and see if it shows up. No. I should know what my own lecture says. All right. Treaty of Tordesillas. And that was Alexander VI who did that. I'm sure it was somebody working for him. You should have learned about that in AP World History, the Treaty of Tordesillas. It's going to be important later on because when they drew the map, it was supposed to go down the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. But I guess they had a bad map or, it hadn't been explored enough yet. So what they did was when they drew the line down, Brazil, which juts out into the Atlantic Ocean, the tip of Brazil was on the Portuguese side, and that and something else that's going to happen, we'll learn in another chapter, is going to give Portugal claim to Brazil. And what language do they speak down there in Brazil today? Portuguese. So this is the Borgia family, and they're famous for this time period. Balance of power, I've told you about, and that's where if you have, let me see if I can give it to you in modern day high school terms. Usually I did this in AP World last year. I used 3 girls as an example. And I said, let's say that all 3 of you are, and I picked a club. I'll pick a club we don't have here, the Key Club. Most high schools have a Key Club. A Popka doesn't, I don't think. Mine sure did. They had all the jackets, and I'm going to my Key Club meeting. I was a band geek, so I didn't go to Key Club. So the deal is, we'll say 3 girls that are in Key Club. And they all want to be president of Key Club. And so none of them really like each other. They're all competitive. But let's say Susie is getting to be too powerful. So what do Alice and Jenny do? Now, they don't really any of them like each other. The 2 that are lower than the one who's gaining all the power, they need to ally and try to knock her down. Now, I'm not telling you this is the way things should be. I'm telling you, this is the way they are. And I'm not saying it should be this way. That's the balance of power. So if you've got a powerful city, and you've got two slightly less powerful cities, which are jealous of their power, they can ally together and beat that city to diminish it. Then, of course, they're probably going to turn on each other. That is the balance of power. And it's quite often used down here in Italy, and you really need to know this. This is going to become a big deal in European history until finally, probably my favorite person in European history to talk about. Peter the Great may not be a great guy, but he's fun to talk about. I like to talk about Stalin. I have to tell the kids every year, no, he's not a good guy. He's a killer. He's still fun to talk about because he's interesting to talk about. He's not a nice guy. But probably who I enjoy talking about the most is the person who's going to bring this balance of power concept to a art form. And there's books written on him about how good he is. He cannot be as smart as they say. It's just impossible that someone could be this smart. And his name, of course, if you look at your password for Remind, his name is Otto von Bismarck. They call him OVB. That's his nickname amongst the AP European History teacher crowd, my peeps, okay? He's OVB. And it's called Realpolitik. And he is a Prussian, and we'll get to that later on. He's a member of the Prussian Junker Corps, and he is going to have this down to an art form. But it's really famous that the Italians used it. What else have we got here? Italy is weak and divided, and it is dominated. This is very important. Here, I'm laying a lot of groundwork here. It is dominated by France and the Holy Roman Empire. So I want you to put that. The HRE stands for the Holy Roman Empire. And you see that question mark there? What it means is, what is the Holy Roman Empire? And here's what I want you to put. Germany-ish. There's people in there that aren't German, but just put Germany-ish, which is not a word, but it's my class. I can make up words if I want. Germany-ish. Germany-ish. So the Holy Roman Empire, it's got French people in it. It's got all sorts of people from Eastern Europe. Just think of it as Germany plus some buddies, okay? And we're 42 minutes into this lecture. If you think that I wandered far afield, I'm going to be like this all year. I love this class. I have a master's degree in it. I chose to get my graduate degree. I could have gotten an easier one in European history. I love this stuff. Wait till you see me talk about Napoleon. He's another person you might not want to meet, but he's sure enough fun to talk about. All right, and this is going to be the lecture for today.